Hey, how's it going again? Today, Arrowhead CCO talks about a minigun stratagem and why they can't do it at the current moment. He's also thinking about a new stamina recoil mechanic. Not only that, he brought up how there was a permanent shot before launch, but it was put aside. And there's so much more I'll be covering. If you can, make sure to tap the like button below, and let's get right into it. There's been conversations in the community about a minigun stratagem for a while. I'd say a lot of us want it, but we've never heard the Arrowhead team talk about it until just recently, when the CCO responded to a comment on Reddit where a player basically said there's no need for a standalone weapon and a belt-fed backpack would suffice and they would be happy with it. The Arrowhead CCO, Mr. Pillowstay, responded to that post with an interesting reply. He talked about how they can't do it at the current moment, due to the fact that the game currently doesn't support a weapon occupying 2 slots. The full response and proof can be found here, and he replied back with this: "Would be even better, but there are things we want to do before that. Miniguns as a carried weapon are notoriously problematic. You can see this in every video of people hip firing a minigun. They are more or less thrown backwards by the insane recoil. The way we would solve this is to have players be moved backwards unless they take up a steady firing position. This would probably also apply to the HMG, which was added maybe a bit prematurely. In addition, the backpack magazine is needed, and unfortunately the game currently doesn't support a weapon occupying 2 slots, which will have to be resolved before a minigun can be added. After all that is done, 5.5mm minigun will be ready to be deployed. Anybody has any other design suggestions for how to realize a minigun in Helldivers?" What's interesting about this response is that he talks about how the heavy machine gun was added prematurely, meaning we could very well see more features with it. For instance, how he brought up the recoil would kick us backwards unless we were in a steady position. That could be something we see with the HMG in the near future, as well as the minigun. Who knows, maybe the Bipods will actually serve a purpose as well. Maybe they'll give us better and steadier aiming. I like this a lot overall, and a little bit later on in the video, we'll discuss the CCO's thoughts about a stamina mechanic. But as of right now, it looks like the machine gun could see additional features and the minigun. As I've mentioned earlier, this is not possible yet, but that doesn't mean they're not able to do it. Also, I like how he asked for suggestions on the minigun stratagem. You don't see a lot of developers doing that. I'm not saying there's none that do it, yet in my opinion, it's rare to see a developer ask for suggestions. We're not done just talking about the minigun. Just recently, the CCO posted another response about the potential stratagem. This time it's on X or Twitter, whichever one you prefer to call it. There's a player that brought up a good point that the autocannon doesn't require 2 slots, instead it just uses 1. And the same player mentioned that developers don't have to make it so that the ammo comes out of the backpack, instead it would be the magazine and the weapon, but they could still have the aesthetics of it being a belt-fed backpack. The CCO replied to that post and said, "Right, it's all the same issue. Visuals won't work without additional implementation, like the actual belt. Easiest would be for backpack and gun to be 1 unit. Seems like if Arrowhead can figure out a game plan with the minigun, we could see that stratagem soon. What would be nice is to have a patch that specifically targets the machine guns, where they add a bunch of additional features, like giving the bipods a purpose, and making sure that the belt-fed backpack can not only be used on the minigun, but also on the heavy machine gun as well." So with that said, what do you suggest the developers do? Let's talk about it in the comments below. We're now going to discuss how the CCO is considering a potential new stamina recoil mechanic. The conversation came about when a Helldiver said that they should make it so that the minigun would affect speed and stamina. Mr. Pillowstay thinks it's a great idea, and he wrote back with this: "Stamina drain is a great idea, and when too low, you can't resist the recoil." Then Pillowstay posted another comment under his response and said this exactly right here: "Man, thinking about this more. This is in general a great system. I gotta meditate on this. There's something awesome here in regards to recoil control and stamina." Hopefully they're considering it not just for the minigun, but for the rest of the machine guns as well, so you can use your stamina to control the recoil better and be more precise with your shots. Currently, there's no discussion about whether they'll implement this for the machine guns and the potential minigun stratagem. Once I see more news about this specific topic, I'll be sure to update you all in another video. Moving along, at some point in this video, I brought up how currently the bipods do not serve any sort of purpose whatsoever. There's a hint that it might just have a function later on down the road. The CCO, Mr. Pillowstay, replied to a post talking about how at some point they'll update the core mechanics. The post is right here, and he mentioned this: "Agree, at some point we will update the core mechanics to become deeper, both in positives and negatives, like why doesn't the bipods work?" That right there is something I'm certainly looking forward to. Can you imagine being able to rest the bipod on top of an object in-game and controlling the recoil a lot better? Or being in a prone position with the bipod out and it becomes steadier when aiming? A functional bipod sounds great overall, as well as weapons with a silencer sounds cool too. But we'll see what the future holds and what the developers plan to implement. What I'd like to bring up next is another potential hint. We could see arc grenades and a lunge mine. If you're not too sure what a lunge mine is, it was used back in World War II where the Japanese attached a mine to essentially a large wooden stick, and yeah, they would run towards tanks to blow them up. Although the impact would be extremely severe and dangerous where the person using it would most likely blow up as well. Anyway, with that short history lesson out of the way, the Chief Creative Officer mentioned on this Reddit post here that he had sent the design team this about a month ago. So that is something I think would be cool, and there's another post where a player asked for arc grenades, an arc bolt rifle, and an orbital lightning strike. In response, Pilstead wrote back and said, "You will have arc grenades, and I will deliver them. To you?" Question mark? Now, of course, none of this is confirmed, which is why I mentioned potential hints, but I'd like to see these tools featured. I personally would like to see more arc weapons more than anything. The arc grenades sound exciting and fun, but an arc sniper rifle or an arc bolt rifle, like the original poster mentioned, is also a cool idea. So what type of arc weapons would you like to see? We're going to put that conversation aside and move on towards the shop in fear of missing out. We all know that after the Killzone 2 crossover, it showed that we badly need a permanent shop and not just rotation. Surprisingly enough, the developers had a permanent store implemented before Helldivers 2 launched back in February. Unfortunately, this was scrapped due to the developers having too much on their plate. There's a Helldiver that mentioned they hope they ditched the fear of missing out, and Arrowhead CCO wrote back to that post and said, "Yeah, it wasn't intended to be FOMO light, it was intended to be a common talking point about which items are offered this time unit. We unfortunately scrapped the permanent store before launch due to the team having too much on their plate, and it was one that was furthest from completion, and we didn't want to burn out the team by ordering overtime." Well, that sucks, but it makes sense as to why the Arrowhead team didn't feature it from the start. As you can tell, he essentially said it wasn't ready and it was far from being completed, plus, you don't want to burn out the team too. The good news about this is that there's a high chance they'll bring that feature back into the game, and secondly, it's amazing to see that they were going to feature a permanent store, so their intentions were not to cause FOMO with the shop items. It's mainly because they couldn't feature the permanent shop like they wanted to from the beginning. I'm sure the recent crossover controversy has motivated them even more to implement a permanent store. Well, sure, that sucks, but it makes sense as to why the Arrow team didn't feature that from the start. As you can tell, he essentially said it wasn't ready and it was far from being completed. And on top of that, you don't want to burn out the team too, right? The good news about this is that there's a high chance they'll bring that feature into the game, and secondly, it's amazing to see that they were going to feature a permanent store, so their intentions were not to cause FOMO with these shop items. It's mainly because they couldn't feature the permanent shop like they wanted to from the beginning. I'm sure the recent crossover controversy has motivated them even more to implement a permanent store. Speaking of crossovers, there's a player that asked for a way to toggle off and on visibilities for armors that are using crossovers. Basically, instead of seeing the Killzone 2 armor, you would see the basic Helldivers 2 armor. The Chief Creative Officer, Mr. Pilstead, saw this post and replied to it with this: "I think it's a cop-out to do this, and it creates an even bigger problem. One where we can't agree on reality in Helldivers 2. I am not 1000% against it, but that situation will then devolve into a question internally at the studio of, well, since everyone can choose to turn it off, why can't we do a Rick and Morty, Futurama, Space Marine, Snoop, whatever crossover? And then slippery slope from there." Honestly, I don't have any issues if they were to feature a way to toggle the armor off and on, but at the same time, I don't mind seeing the crossover armors. Plus, it's not like there's a bunch of skins from different games, right? I think in reality, we'll probably see maybe 3 crossovers max in the next 2 to 3 years from now. With that said, I don't think a toggling option is necessary at all for Helldivers 2. If you feel differently about it, you can let me know your thoughts about this topic, but I don't have any remarks about it. Last but not least for today's video, the last discussion is about pre-customizable loadouts, or in other words, saved loadouts. This Helldiver here posted an image with a text that says, "How about pre-customizable loadouts?" I'm sure you can guess who responded to this. Yep, Mr. Pilstead. And in his response, he basically said he agrees and that it needs to happen. The only reason why they didn't do it at launch is mainly because they wanted us to consider our friends' loadouts. Overall, there's been a lot here that we've talked about, but my dream patch would be an update that gives the Bipods a purpose, saved loadouts, the ability to change armor colors with what we've already unlocked, a minigun, as well as a patch that is solely focused on improving or adding more features to the machine guns. So with that all being said, what is your dream patch? What would you like to see in an upcoming patch? Last but not least, it looks like the SteamDB files have been updated, but there's not much here to talk about. It does mean that the developers, or at least some of them, are back in the studio, but not everyone will be back until this 7th. Now, usually I go over your suggested loadouts, but today I'm going to take a look at some more loadouts and we'll talk about them in the next video. But if you want, post your loadout again in this video and I'll definitely check it out. With everything out of the way, this is your Helldivers 2 News. We're now going to check out the top 3 comments. All you have to do to be featured is comment down below. The first top comment is from the Trout Hammer. According to the recent broadcast about the Volus, along with losing their ability to vote, they're also no longer forklift certified. Yeah, we sort of talked about that in another top comment, but yeah, man, I guess they don't have the ability to forklift anymore. Of course, for obvious reasons. The second top comment is by Rotten Muffin 826. I agree with not pay DLC. It would divide the player base. But in terms of support, now that they revealed the Illuminate, I would 100% buy a hardbook, art book with concept art and such. Me too. And maybe that's something they'll consider down the road. The third and final comment is by Pingu Blue MC. For the kicking, you have to enter and then exit the Hellbots on the ship. Then you become kickable. I didn't know that, but I appreciate you commenting that, and I believe I commented back to you saying thank you. So those are the top 3 comments. Make sure you guys share this video out with your friends. Talk about it with me down below in the comments. Give this video a like, and if you want to, subscribe and turn on notifications. I appreciate all the support. Tomorrow's going to be a new year, guys. Hope you all have a wonderful New Year's. And don't forget, the giveaway is still going on today, about probably 6 hours, or no, not even 6 hours, actually. 3 hours from now, the announcements will be made, so make sure you check that out. So anyways, thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.